Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, the best place to be wherever you are on your wealth journey right now. Today I want to talk about the stamp duty holiday extension which was announced in last week's budget. Now I did a video last summer about the stamp duty holiday, but I thought it would be a good idea just to refresh our memories and also to explain how it's going to work between July and October. Now stamp duty is the short term for stamp duty land tax, which is payable to the government on property and land purchases in the UK. Now for avoidance of doubt, I'm going to cover the stamp duty that we pay in England and Northern Ireland and not Wales or Scotland because those are slightly different. But I'm certainly going to talk about the different stamp duty rates in England and Northern Ireland and the way that it all works. And I'll also pop all the current stamp duty rates, including the holiday rates and everything else and the dates, in the description just underneath this video for you. Now there are currently two different rates of stamp duty in England. We have one rate of stamp duty for somebody who only owns one property on the day of completion. So this is likely to be the residential house that you actually live in. You would either be a first-time buyer, or it might be that you've sold a property and bought a new one, in which case you would still only have one property on the day of completion. And you guys pay one rate of stamp duty. There's also another rate of stamp duty for people who have two or more properties on the day of completion. So they would be investors, for example, like myself, who've got a buy-to-let portfolio and they're adding to their portfolio. It might be that you've got a holiday home or a second home somewhere, or it might be that you're an accidental landlord and you've maybe moved in with a partner and got a spare house that you still own, or it might be that you have inherited a property from somebody deceased. And the rule of thumb for these people is that if you have two or more properties on the day of completion, you pay the standard rate of stamp duty, which is the same as what the person who had one property would pay, plus you have to pay an extra 3% on top of that. Now in what I will loosely call normal times, BC, before COVID, however you want to describe it, someone with only one property on the day of completion would not pay any stamp duty at all on the first £125,000 of the purchase. After that it's tiered in the same way that income tax is tiered. So if I give you an example, if you bought a property for £150,000 and it was the only property that you had one on the day of completion, then you would pay no stamp duty at all on the first £125,000 and you would pay 2% stamp duty on the next £25,000 to make the whole amount up to £150,000. So your total stamp duty liability in that example is £25,000 times 2%, which is £500 stamp duty to pay. Now if you have two or more properties on the day of completion, so if you're an investor or you have a holiday home or whatever, then you would pay no stamp duty at all on the first £39,999. So if you were to buy a property at £35,000, for example, there'll be no stamp duty to pay at all. The moment the property value hits £40,000, you have to pay the full 3% stamp duty on the whole of the £40,000, not just on the £1. So you need to kind of factor that in when you're doing your buy-to-lets and extra properties. After that, it's tiered just like in the other example. So let's say, for example, we're buying a property and let's say it's a buy-to-let. We've got two or more properties on the day of completion and we're buying that property for £150,000. Our stamp duty liability will be calculated as follows. We would pay 3% stamp duty on the first £125,000, which is £3,750. And then we would pay 5% on the next £25,000, which is £1,250. So £3,750 plus £1,250 comes to £5,000. So quite a big difference in stamp duty between someone who has more than one property on the day of completion and somebody who has only one. So that's how things work normally. All right, let's talk about the stamp duty holiday then. So the government came out last summer with a scheme for the stamp duty, what we call holiday. And I'm putting it in inverted commas because it isn't like a holiday. It's just a kind of little break from paying quite as much stamp duty as we normally would. And what the government said last summer was that anybody buying a property between then and the 31st of March this year, 2021, would not have to pay any stamp duty at all on the first £500,000 of their property purchase if they only had one property on the day of completion. So that's obviously really, really helpful. But what's happened since then is obviously COVID has kind of lasted for longer than everybody thought it would, and we're still in a position at the moment, at least, where we're still in lockdown and so on. And what this means is that people are trying to complete on their properties before the end of March and really struggling to do that because we've now got a backlog of everything happening. Because when the government come out and announce a scheme like that, everybody wants to go and buy a property, and if everybody's buying all at once, you end up with backlogs. So your mortgage broker is going to be backlogged because they're going to have different applications to do. Your mortgage lender is going to have a huge backlog because, especially if they're a popular one, everybody's going to be wanting to use their products. That's going to have a knock-on effect because you will also have your valuation done, and your valuer might not be able to get there, or they might have a big backlog as well because of all the different applications coming in. And then your solicitor is also going to have a backlog because they're going to be in high demand as well. And this kind of knock-on effect has really affected a lot of people. And so the government have come out and said, okay, well, rather than just stopping it where it is on the 31st of March, we're going to extend it to the 30th of June 2021. So that's really great. So at the moment, between now and June the 30th, 2021, if you buy a property and it's your main residence, for example, and you only have one property on the day of completion, then you have no stamp duty at all to pay on the first £500,000. Now that's a massive difference already to normal times because, for example, when I bought my house in 2017, my stamp duty was £11,250. And if I bought my property now, today, I wouldn't have any stamp duty to pay. So it's definitely worthwhile taking advantage of this scheme if you can. Going back to our investor rates of stamp duty for people who have 2 or more properties on the day of completion, you guys would still have to pay the extra 3% stamp duty. So if you guys bought an investment property worth £150,000 between now and the 30th of June, you would pay 3% on the full £150,000. So your stamp duty liability in that example would be £4,500, which is still £500 cheaper than if you bought it during normal times. Now, rather than just cut the stamp duty holiday off on the 30th of June, the government have thought it through a little bit further this time because they know, just like it would have done in March, that it would have created a lot of panic in the marketplace and all the backlogs for everybody, which wouldn't be ideal. So what they've said is, okay, we're going to introduce an interim measure to take us from the 1st of July through to the 30th of September. And then on the 30th of September, that's when we'll revert to the normal rates of stamp duty that we had before COVID. So what is this interim rate then between the beginning of July and the end of September? Well, if you only have one property on the day of completion, during that interim period, you will not have to pay any stamp duty at all on the first £250,000 of your property purchase. After that, it's 5% on anything up to £925,000. So if you were buying a property for £150,000, for example, during that period, you would still have no stamp duty at all to pay. If you were buying a property for £300,000 during that period, so between the 1st of July and the 30th of September, then you would have no stamp duty to pay on the first £250,000 and you would have 5% stamp duty to pay on the remaining £50,000. So your stamp duty liability in that case would be £2,500. If you're an investor or you've got more than one property on the day of completion during that period between the 1st of July and the 30th of September, and let's say you bought a property for £150,000, then you would pay 3% stamp duty on the full £150,000. So £4,500 stamp duty. So as you can see, this scheme is particularly good and there are big savings to be made. So I would definitely recommend taking advantage of the scheme if it's right for you to do so at the moment. So if you're thinking about moving anyway, now might be a great time to do that. And likewise, if you're buying an investment property, it's still good depending on the purchase price of the property, obviously, but there are still savings to be made there. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Do give me a thumbs up underneath if you have enjoyed it. Also, have a watch of these 2 videos up next because they will hopefully help with your wealth journey. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet as well. And thanks ever so much for watching this week, guys. Do stay safe and I'll see you in the next one.